Ebuka, bye. Hello, Shay. Hello, Shay. Emmanuel, can you hear me? Hello?
All right, I can hear you. Sorry, I could not. Can you hear me now, sir? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let me unmute Shay. Okay. I'll admit Ebuka and then unmute Shay.
Okay, I hope my background is still intact.
Yes, your background is intact.
Okay. All right, so I guess I'm set. It's just to see if I can share my presentation. I hope I can share my content.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see.
All right. Okay, Shay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, brilliant. So we have Shay. Shay, on the other side is Emmanuel Edet, the co-panelist.
Okay.
And then
Pleasure meeting you, Shay.
Same here, Emmanuel.
Goodness is trying to join also. This is 3 minutes to 11 o'clock, so I think we can start to admit the audience. Do I have your approval for that?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think it's okay. You can go ahead.
So that we can start at exactly 11 o'clock. Okay, I think Ebuka was already admitting other.
Okay, just for your information, it says only the host can share content. So
yeah, I'll allow you to share content. That's fine. Not a problem.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, check it. Okay, check it now.
Oh, that's fine.
All right, check. Shay, can you check your side also that you can share content?
Okay.
I think it should
yes,
work.
I can.
Okay,
I can.
brilliant. So, yeah, so Gideon is admitting the attendees.
Yeah, you can all share content.
Yeah, that's fine. That's we've tested. So Gideon, are you admitting the attendees? Are you able to allow people in, Gideon? Goodness, you didn't show your face. Okay. Okay, we joined from the. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Emmanuel. Good morning, Sheyi. The meeting is now open. I'd like to find out from the audience, please, just by way of raising up your hands or sending a note, just let us know. Is everyone hearing me? Can you indicate, no, just send a chat. Yes, I can hear. Ebuka, send a chat, just yes, I can hear. Joyce, just send a chat, yes, I can hear. Okay, Chidi confirmed that he can hear. Okay, she hears. So I'll take this that everybody is hearing us. I'm going to start in the next 2 minutes. I hope that's fine. Can we? Yes, I can hear you. Okay, great. So obviously people are, my audio is good. And by the way, this event is being streamed live on WhatsApp and YouTube, so that others who could not register will be able to join, seeing the importance of this call. Okay, so now I'd like to start. May I use this opportunity to welcome everyone to this webinar today. I want to thank you for making our time to attend, and good morning to everyone. This webinar with theme data and privacy protection. Why should you care? By the way, my name is Peter Ejiofor, and I work with Ethnos IT Solutions, a cybersecurity company based in Lagos. The objective of this subject, you will recall that in May 2018, the EU passed privacy legislation, the GDPR. From that point, other countries found it important to create similar legislations to protect their citizens' data and privacy of their information. The legislation seeks to regulate the use and protection of personally identifiable information. Based on these legislations, all organizations that process personal data are obliged to comply with the new privacy regulations. Of course, striving to keep it up brought a lot of pressure to organizations all around the world. Moreover, on the heels of the EU GDPR legislation, the Nigerian regulatory body NITDA issued the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation Framework in 2019. The framework, again, seeks to safeguard the rights of natural persons to data privacy, as well as introduces compliance obligations for organizations that collect and process personal data. The NDPR framework mandates that data controllers, that is, organizations, both private and public, that collect, process, control, or determine how personal data that is collected is processed, to conduct a data protection audit and file an audit report with NITDA. Again, the audit report must be conducted through a licensed DPCO, which Ethnos is one. It is equally important to note that any organization that is found to be in breach of the Act could be at risk of being penalized by NITDA and other relevant agencies. But more importantly, however, is why is it so important for governments all over the world to become so interested in the protection of data and privacy of the citizens? And why should anybody care about this data privacy and protection issues, including the data owners, the data collectors, the data processors, and data holders? Just for emphasis, the breach of Data Protection Act can take place if there is a misuse of personal data, illegal processing of personal data, or if a person is unaware that his or her data is in use for an online marketing or any other marketing purposes for which the user did not provide their consent to the organization to use their data. For this reason, therefore, organizations must ensure that personal data they collect should be used properly and legally. One, it should be collected, held, and processed for only specified purposes, which they will also let the data owner know. Sufficient and relevant and by no means excessive. The data must be accurate and kept up to date. Data should be retained for an excessive period. Such data should not be retained for an excessive period if it is no longer applicable. Again, an individual's rights must be protected and not be forgotten when processing the data, which means that the individual who gives us the data has rights. And lastly, the data must be securely stored and processed. And so to help us address these issues today, I have two eminent qualified experts on this panel. They include Seyi Owoturo, Emmanuel Edet, and Goodness Obani. I would allow them to introduce themselves properly the way that they want to be introduced. Again, I guess this is part of the data privacy subject. However, Seyi will be speaking on Data is the new oil of the digital economy and why it is important to protect it. While Emmanuel is looking at the legal framework and his topic talks about regulation is coming, how should you be thinking about data, security, privacy, and consequences of non-compliance? And then Goodness is looking at data and privacy protection beyond compliance. After you have complied, what next? A few housekeeping items. If you have questions, kindly post or type it on the chat window so that speakers will look at it and address them in the course of the presentation. However, if your questions are not fully addressed, you're free to contact us by sending an email to ethnos@ethnos.com.ng or send or you can call 0809-356-0828. This contact information will also be provided at the end of the session. So without wasting time, because we want to stick to time and make sure that we do not keep people beyond the time we promised to keep people. Let me allow Seyi Owo to kickstart this conversation by discussing the value, the importance of your data. Why should you care, or why should data be protected? Seyi, over to you.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you very much for the background information. My name is Seyi Owo. I'm a chartered accountant by training, and I've operated within the Nigerian capital market for upwards of 22, 23 years. Up until March 31st, 2021, I was the MD and CEO of Coronation Registrars, formerly United Securities. We're registrars to some of the foremost companies listed on the Nigerian exchange. Currently, I am the president and chairman of council of the Institute of Capital Market Registrars. So my presentation this morning is going to look primarily at the business side of data privacy, why we should care about data privacy and data protection, strictly from the business side, while I leave all the other technical sides and the regulatory side to the micro presenters. So without much ado, I'll go just dive into the presentation proper. I trust you can all see my screen. Kindly confirm that you can see my screen, please. Hello, can someone kindly confirm that my screen is visible? Thank you.
Yes, your screen is up, Seyi. Go ahead.
Admin or host, can you confirm that my screen is visible?
Seyi, yeah, we can see your screen, Seyi.
Oh.
Seyi, your screen is showing.
I think I'm experiencing some challenges here. My screen is no longer showing. Give me a second, please.
But can you see it from your side at all?
I can't see it from my side either, so I'm restarting the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. I believe it should be fine now.
Yes, we can see your slide now.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. So I go diving straight into the presentation. So this is the outline, why we need to protect data, question and answer, and then we'll wrap it up. And, you know, if we all agree that, if we all agree that data is the new oil of the digital economy, we know that there are always people seeking to illegally mine and profit from it. And this is why basically we need to protect data. I'll go straight to question and answer so that we can wrap up this part of the presentation. That was just a joke, and it was to like an icebreaker. So the real outline, I think first we should define what whether data, we go into the evolution of data management, the need for data protection, how data protection or lack of it may affect you, data governance and the components of data governance, and then we'll go into question and answers. Host, if you please permit me, I want to switch my internet connection to a different provider. I think the one I'm using is stable. So if it happens again, I have to switch, please. My apologies.
Okay, go ahead, Shay. That's fine.
Okay, so data is defined as units of information. Yeah, data. Okay, data are units of information, often numeric, that are collected through observation. In a more technical sense, data are sets of values or qualitative or quantitative variables about one or more persons. Oh.
Yeah, you're back, Shay. Go ahead. Sorry about the. You need to unmute.
Internet connection. That one had a serious problem, and I tested it yesterday. to be sure that it was fine. So my apologies. These are some of the challenges of, okay. Okay. I think we're at defining data. Data are used in scientific research, business management, e.g. sales data, revenue, and all of that. This definition was lifted from Wikipedia. So having defined data and what it is, we go into whether data is or is not oil. So in its May 6, 2017 edition, The Economist had an article titled "The World's Most Valuable Resource is No Longer Oil, but Data." The article documented the rise of such tech giants as Alphabet, Google's parent company, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. These companies were the 5 most valuable companies in the world in 2017 when the article was published, and accounted for almost 100% of the growth in digital advertising in the United States in 2016. In its global top 100 companies by market capitalization published in May 2021, PwC reported that technology companies saw a 71% growth in their market capitalization between March 2020 and May 2021, with Apple Inc. bouncing back as the world's most valuable company. The Economist's May 6, 2017 article opined that far from gouging customers, many of the services offered by these tech giants are free. Users pay in effect by handing over yet more data. In an article in Business Insider, February 19, 2014, Jim Edwards opined that Facebook paid $19 billion to acquire WhatsApp, even though Facebook offered similar services as WhatsApp through its Messenger app. The secret was that while Facebook had 1.2 billion monthly users, WhatsApp processed 27 billion messages daily. An agricultural research institute possesses technology to alter the genetic composition of plants to reduce the effect of weather patterns on yields, but lacks sufficient data to successfully analyze the patterns and effectively deploy its genetic modification technology. Now, if we look at all of these points, they're all gearing towards one thing: the crucial nature of data and how it can, the value behind the data that certain companies keep. So in my opinion, I think that these bullet points provide sufficient evidence of the value of data to an enterprise. On a lighter mood, we're going into the evolution of data management. I think that, in my opinion, the earliest example of data management can be found in the Bible and the story of Abraham making a case for Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham used data at his disposal to negotiate with God so that God would not destroy the city. In my view, Abraham must have figured that between Lot, his wife, his sons and their wives, as well as a few friends that Lot would have made who had his good character, there should have been at least 10 righteous souls in the city, and God wouldn't destroy it. But his analysis was off the mark. This is just in the lighter mood. To the more serious business. So the evolution of data management. So data management is a practice of collecting, keeping, and using data securely. Mark the word securely, efficiently, and cost-effectively. The goal of data management is to help people and organizations and connected things optimize the use of data within the bounds of policy and regulation so that they can make decisions and take actions that maximize the benefit to the organization. And that definition is by Oracle. The tech people will know who Oracle is. And the concept of data management itself began in the 1960s when the Association of Data Processing Service Organizations, which went on to be known as Information Technology Association of America, and now Tech America. Its members were companies offering computer software services to the public. Its mission was to improve management methods and develop service possibilities and define standards of performance for the software and services industry. And it's noteworthy that when data management became an issue, most processes were still slow, and computers were slow and clumsy. Most processes were still required significant manual interventions. And my computers, which were majorly punch cards, were huge and required massive space. While data theft has always existed, we've all read novels and watched movies of international espionage and industrial espionage, etc. Increased computerization and interconnectedness has elevated it to such a great scale that's a significant source of worry for governments and private companies and individuals alike. So having defined what data management is, which is a responsibility of every organization that holds data about customers or third parties, let's go into why I feel that the need for data protection itself. So if you look at from banking to insurance, online merchandising, especially securities trading, and even governments, digital transformation is now being widely undertaken by organizations in all sectors. And this has led to increased interconnectivity. Many organizations are migrating their user data to the cloud. And the adoption of digital technology has heightened the threat to data security. Unfortunately, the risk management practices required to support the proliferation of digital analytics transformations has not kept pace with the development in the data industry, in the digital transformation sector. Significant gaps still exist between the frequency of technology improvements and adoption and improvements in risk management practices to address emerging risk. This gap can only be closed by risk innovation at scale and improvements in the risk frameworks to deal with new and emerging risks from adoption of digital technology. And you will agree that digital initiatives require more detailed data to be collected. So today, we find that companies are collecting a lot more data because they need to perform some analytics. They need to understand certain behavior and trends. And because of that, more and more data is being collected, and more data is being moved within organizations and even outside organizations. The movement of this data, of course, creates inherent risks in data availability, location, access, and privacy. The COVID-19 environment has also further deepened the disparity between the demands of risk management and existing capabilities. And the business and social disruptions occasioned by it, by the crisis, have compounded the additional risk layers. The pandemic arguably has set off the largest wave of digital analytics transformations in history. So while many organizations had some security policies and training in place before the pandemic, not many of them were prepared for the challenges that remote working, for example, will bring, and the rapid acquisition and development of new tools. So this provides us the background as to the need for data protection. So today, COVID-19, we are having this session online. A year ago, or 2 years ago, this would have been a physical session. I have had, this month alone, I've had probably 15 meetings, all of them virtual. So that gives us an indication of how technology and digital transformation has come to stay and is affecting our lives. And of course, the challenges it brings along in terms of how securely these tools are being used. So in terms of how data protection could affect you or your organization. You know that today's organizations are built on largely on trust. This is especially true for financial services, legal profession, medical profession, and online retailers, where customers or potential customers feel that they have concerns around how their data is going to be used or the security of their data or personal information. It could lead to loss of business. And research has shown that customers are typically more willing to share information with banks than with any other business sector. All right, reputational risk. Significantly, businesses risk damage to their reputation should customer data be exposed to third parties. And one of the earliest, probably one of the first notorious cases of data breach was in 2013. Target is a US online retailer. In 2013, hackers stole 40 million credit card numbers and personal details of 70 million customers. The fact that the attack happened during the holiday shopping period also made it worse. Many customers, after that breach, many customers of Target canceled their cards and stopped shopping at the online retailer. If you look to the right of the screen, the customer perception rating for Target dropped by 58.48% the year following the attack. That shows us the significant risk to reputation from a data breach. Cyber attacks are also a threat to business continuity. Those in the IT profession would have heard about the US company Colonial Pipeline, which was a victim of ransomware attack in May 2021. Now, ransomware attack is where hackers take over the IT assets of an enterprise, and that enterprise is not able to utilize or gain access to its own IT assets. Hackers then demand a ransom. In the Colonial Pipeline case, the US government had to declare a state of emergency because that company could no longer continue in business. But its business was so critical to its customers that the US had to declare a state of emergency. And then Colonial ended up paying 2.3 million in ransom using Bitcoin because, of course, the hackers didn't want to be traced. But interestingly enough, the US Justice Department was able to recover the ransom money that was paid. Furthermore, good data, strong data security can bring in business as data becomes the center of digital transformations and innovation and customer engagement. A lot of the engagement happening between companies and their customers today is done digitally. So if a company has a reputation for a strong data security, it can be a competitive advantage for that business. For example, in 2019, a study from IBM and the Ponemon Institute find that data breaches cost customer turnover of 3.9%. This figure implies that breaches can be the last straw for almost 4% of customers, causing them to seek a competitor. So therefore, a good cybersecurity reputation could lead much of that flight to safety to fall into your company's lap. Also, a study conducted by Varonis, a data security solutions company, indicated that just 17% of people would be willing to do business with a bank after a data breach. The same study found that only 20% would be willing to visit a hotel that had been breached, while 42% will shop at a retail store. Now, these numbers indicate that a good and strong data security architecture could be a competitive advantage for your business, which is why a number of companies will go for certifications in respect of their IT systems and their processes, so that their customers and stakeholders will begin to have some level of trust in their operations. Financial loss from litigation could also be result from data breaches and lack of good data management practices. Every organization that holds consumer data, particularly sensitive consumer data, faces the risk that that data could be compromised. Data protection legislation places responsibility on custodians of customer data to keep the data safe from unauthorized use and access. Where privacy is breached, organizations could be exposed to litigation, including class actions, which could be long drawn. In the Target case, the company reported that the data breach cost them $202 million, and the company had to settle a class action suit for $18.5 million. That gives us an indication of the severity of the financial loss that could result in a data breach. Unintentional data or accidental data breaches could lead to loss of data integrity. The resulting effect, of course, could be loss of reputation, revenue, or litigation. An interesting and bizarre example is, you should also know that data breaches don't only occur within IT systems. They could also occur outside the IT infrastructure. And one bizarre example is that of a registrar company in Nigeria that posted information about unclaimed dividends to his customers through surface mail. And some of that information was intercepted by fraudsters who then they now built identities around that information to then come and claim benefits running into several millions. The attempt was stopped, but it shows us that data breaches could also happen outside of IT systems, unintentionally also. Regulatory compliance. Non-adherence to industry-specific or general data security and privacy requirements may lead to regulatory sanctions, which could be both financial and reputational. Data privacy regulations also have multi-jurisdiction implications. For example, a Nigerian company that holds data of European Union, EU citizens is expected to comply with the European data protection regulations as it affects EU citizens. I give you an example. My company is registered to Airtel Africa. Now, Airtel Africa, sometimes people confuse Airtel Africa with Airtel Nigeria. Airtel Africa is actually a UK company listed on the London Stock Exchange and has a secondary listing on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, which is now the NGX. All right. Now, because Airtel Africa is not a Nigerian company, if my company therefore does not abide by the EU data protection legislation, my company could get sanctioned. And you ask, how will the EU or the UK government then apply that sanction? Don't forget that Airtel Africa is a UK-based company. And if I am sanctioned, if my company is sanctioned by the UK regulator, it means that Airtel Africa then can no longer retain the services of my company, even here in Nigeria. So we find that more and more regulation are crossing boundaries and jurisdictions, and we need to be aware how these regulations affect us and our businesses. Finally, on this topic, data protection has gone beyond even private companies and is now could now be seen more as a national security issue. So therefore, how companies, especially technology companies, collect, retain, handle, share, and sell user data and provide access to users extends beyond privacy. It has national security implications. I don't know how many of us remember the case of a British consulting firm, Cambridge Analytica, which collected 87 million Facebook users data relating to 87 million Facebook users without their consent. Cambridge Analytica then went to use this data to provide an analytical assistance to the 2016 presidential campaigns of Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. The company was also widely accused of interfering with the Brexit referendum in the UK, although this was later dispelled after investigation. You would agree that these occurrences have significant national security implications. While GDPR was years in the making, data breaches and cyber attacks, together with questionable data sharing practices at prominent companies, influenced the attention that was given to the GDPR and the plans of regulators to heighten enforcement action. So we see that occurrence actually bringing a lot of focus to how, especially the big tech companies, utilize user data and how they share those user data. Now we're going to, so as a custodian of user data, we then have to have some sort of governance around how this data is used. So as opposed to data protection, data governance is a comprehensive process of controlling the integrity, use, availability, usability, and security of all data owned by or controlled by an enterprise. Of course, data governance policies and procedures are tailored to address the data management needs of the various departments within the enterprise and could be an integral part of the enterprise risk management system, albeit with its own accountability. Because of the significance of data and its implications, the implications of its misuse, is now imperative on data custodians to set up governance procedures around how this data is used. So when data governance programs are comprehensive and efficient, your enterprise, of course, will benefit from overall improved workflows, better decision-making, reduce costs, improve performance, and greater transparency and accountability. In short, investments in data governance are typically returned multifold. So the elements of data governance has three major elements. The first one is data management itself, which we've discussed. The second one is data privacy, which is coming to play significantly now. The third one is data quality, the data that an organization keeps. How pure is it? How complete is it? And ensuring data quality also has to do with ensuring that that data, the quality is not compromised due to unauthorized access thereabout. So I won't spend much time on this slide because these are things that I believe that we've already discussed. Question and answers. Admin, will the question and answers come after all the presenters have done their presentation, or do we take them now? Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Seyi Owotoro, thank you very much for your presentation. It was strong, good, and highly enlightening and educative.
Thank you.
I believe that we have learned a few new things from this presentation, and then thank you very much. For the questions, we'll probably leave it to the end because we've consumed a lot of time. So without wasting any more time, I'd like to admit the next speaker, Emmanuel Edet. He will properly introduce himself. But just for emphasis, he'll be looking at the legal framework and the regulatory obligations and responsibilities of both the data owners and the data collectors. So let's have Emmanuel now. Emmanuel, can you?
Thank you very much, Peter. And it's a pleasure to be here. let's see how this goes. Let me try and share my screen and see if we can do that. Just a second. Let's see, 1, 0. Okay. All right, can you see my screen? Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yeah, your screen is showing. Go ahead, your screen is showing.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Sheyi. Let me commend you for a very interesting and educating paper, which to a great extent has covered a lot of the issues which I wanted to discuss, and also has provided a very solid what I would call important information regarding data and its protection. So I have about 15 minutes to run you through some of the issues that data protection raises as far as our existence in this digital environment is concerned. Now, over the years, from the mid, should I say, 18th century all the way, we've grown from individual innovations where innovations come maybe once in every 30 or 40 years, like the printing press, through the Industrial Revolution, where the cluster of mechanical development took over the entire world. We gradually moved into the information economy, where it was information was the key and the subject matter of every business and trading. And we finally have arrived where data-driven economy is the in thing for today. So basically, data is everything as far as existence is concerned. Even as human beings, we have been reduced to data sets. And the internet, the mobile phones, the integrated sensors in every equipment that we carry are now needed to generate data. And this results in profit for companies. Sometimes we don't even know how we generate this data. And in fact, I think in 2018, the US had a very secret base in Iraq. And nobody knew where that base was. It was well hidden. But unknown to them, that there's this fitness app that is called Strava, which you can connect your your timepiece, your activity tracker to. So the US soldiers used to go for jog every morning, and they share with their friends their length of jogging, the strength, the speed, and everything on Strava. And this information was available publicly. So by the time Strava collated this data, they realized that the GPS on these activity trackers could easily show the entire perimeter of the US so-called secret base, because the soldiers actually jogged along the fence of the entire base. And it was shocking to even the Americans that what they big data analytics has been made available to the entire world. So it became a very big problem to understand that anything that is free, just consider that you're the product that is being sold, because the companies are using your data to go ahead and make a lot of profit. So Sheyi has already mentioned these issues. Data that transmitted, analyzed, and stored. So you have close to 229 billion in terms of the data analytics market. And then you have over 4.7 billion internet users all over the world. In Nigeria, you have about 108 million, according to the records. You have 35 billion devices connected to the internet. You have so much. In fact, if Facebook was a country, Facebook would probably be third largest country in the whole world because of the number of people on Facebook. So what does this mean? Sheyi has mentioned it, that data is the new oil, and mentioned the source of that quotation. So, but what we have to understand is that many people don't understand that it also contains a lot of opportunities. For example, there are some top in-demand jobs that never existed 10 years ago, like the Uber driver, digital marketer, drone pilot, cloud specialist, Zoom manager. All these are strictly based on data. So apart from the fact that data itself provides some form of super value, it also provides opportunities for us to tap into the data-driven economy. And so now comes the big challenge. What do we do with this data? Initially, countries did not have a problem. But by the time you realize that data-driven countries, sorry, can you still see my screen?
Not, it just disappeared.
Whoa. So I've just been informed by Zoom that it has stopped because of an error. Let's see, let's try again. Unexpectedly. Okay, all right. So is my screen still showing?
Not yet, but I think you can. Yeah, is your screen showing now?
Okay, all right. So let me get back on it. All right, thank you. So like I was saying, initially companies actually controlled data, your personal data, and do whatever they like with it to gain money. In fact, somebody carried out a study and they realized that each instance that your personal data is sold, if you compare it to the profit that the company makes, is probably roughly about $46 per each instance your data is sold. And then the demography also determines the value of your data. So if you are between the ages of 18 and 24, and you are from the Middle Eastern origin and you live in the United States, your data is considered more valuable than maybe a Cherokee Indian who has never left the United States, whose data is almost nothing as far as those companies are concerned. And if you check, as at 2021, the top 10 most profitable countries were all data-driven countries. Data-driven companies, not countries now, because they are so rich. They are richer than a lot of countries. The budget for Amazon alone is almost triple Nigeria's budget, if not more. And so you find out that data is really the value of things that we have available in the current economic trend. So now, what is the target of all this innovation? It is your personal data, be it Airbnb, be it Alert, be it Uber. In fact, I can say that Uber and Bolt probably have more traffic information about how you move around than your government does, which is very scary. And they have this data. Each time you log in, it becomes a bit of a challenge that you don't know what is being done with your data, and you don't know what they are using your data for, and they use it to make a lot of money. And so it has become really, really a point where governments are interested in defining how your data is used, because that defines you. And you also have some personal rights enshrined in the Constitution, which the government seeks to protect, hence the essence of data protection. This is just a snapshot on what data protection is. Later, we are going to talk about the provision in the Constitution regarding your privacy. But we should understand that there's a difference between data protection, data privacy, and data security. Now, privacy is a matter of rights, which is your right to have your own personal space and not to be interfered with. But whether we like it or not, we need your data to do certain things. We need your data for planning. We need your data to provide services. Companies need your data in order to understand who they are dealing with. And so the whole essence of privacy is to ensure that your data is properly managed and not in any way compromised in such a manner that you're going to suffer loss. Hence privacy. Security, on the other hand, is just a simple not so simple anyway. It's just a simple way of ensuring that there is enough access control, there is security, and that whichever company stores data will absolutely ensure that that data is totally protected and not compromised. Sheyi mentioned a lot around confidence, so I'll not go into that, but companies should understand that with the advent of COVID-19, the need for constant face-to-face interaction of human beings has been reduced a lot. The only way you can interact with a person is through online or digital means. And the only way you can know who you are interacting with is if you have access to the person's personal data. And so the need to protect personal data has absolutely increased. You know, people are now using cloud services. They are now working remotely from their homes. And there's absolutely automation of most activities to ensure that businesses keep going. And at the end of the day, you need personal data to run all those things. Of course, we also mentioned the increase of online activities. People stay at home to order foods and products now. So you have these riders running up and down trying to deliver certain goods. Even the riders have your personal phone number because they have to call you, they have your address, they have your full name in order to deliver those items to you. So how are these issues coordinated and how is data managed? It's interesting that initially, security was never an issue that had to be in the front burner. It was just one of those things that you tick the box as a compliance mechanism. Oh, do I have security? Yes, I have security. Tick, and you move on. But in recent times, with the data breaches all around, and she mentioned a whole lot of them,
I'm so sorry. I don't know exactly what happened to Emmanuel. I think this is internet. Let's just give him a few minutes to return back. I think it's internet. I'll call him on his telephone to chat with him. He's reconnected. Where is he?
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. You're back. Welcome back.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so let's keep the screens sharing and let's continue just explaining. So in a nutshell, security has become one of the primary issues that ought to be addressed. I will share the slides later. And the approach to addressing security is totally a wholesome approach. It's no longer the one item on the list of things that ensure compliance, but it's a whole measure that changes your organizational and personal culture of your staff. So you have to add education and awareness, you have to add policy intervention to make sure that you create policies that will ensure that all the security measures you have put in place are adequately applied. It's added advantage also to have industry standards in your security apparatus and evaluation, like the ISO 27001 that deals with information security. You should ensure your technological solutions are up to date. Avoid pirated solutions. Avoid pirated solutions. There's also the issue of physical access. Who has access to what terminal and what services? There's also your relationship with service providers. It's very, very important. You should ensure that service providers actually have standards that will secure your infrastructure against any unwanted interference. Finally, you should also consider insurance. We know that our insurance regime is way behind in terms of protecting IT assets, but it's something that we as an agency need are actually working on to ensure that IT assets are included by the Insurance Commission, because the Insurance Act states that it's only the Insurance Commission that can alter the list of items that can be subject to insurance. Now, checking the world map, we understand that data protection regulation has increased over the past few years. Sheyi also mentioned that a lot. Nigeria is considered as a moderate climate in terms of regulation, but countries like the US, Canada, Brazil, China, and the entire Europe are considered to be very heavy in terms of regulation. There are some other countries that have not even stepped into the map of regulations yet. But what does this tell us? It gives us the idea that regulatory compliance is no longer a local issue. It becomes an international issue, because as your business spreads internationally, you are expected to comply with the climate of wherever you are playing in. And Sheyi also mentioned that, just to reiterate. So it's important that your compliance framework, whoever you are, wherever you are, as long as you're managing personal data, should take into consideration the external issues as far as data protection is concerned. Okay, now coming back to Nigeria, the Constitution recognizes the privacy of citizens in their home and correspondence, telephone conversation, and telegraphic communication. It is absolutely protected and guaranteed. But going beyond that, how does this translate into a digital economy? What do we consider as correspondence, for example, telephone conversations, for example, telegraphic communications, for example? This has been translated into the digital environment. And so you have your emails, you have your text messages, you have your WhatsApp messages, and all this. So based on the Nigerian Constitution, these are supposed to be protected. Your privacy is supposed to be protected. How is this translated in terms of law? The Cybercrime Prohibitions Act, for example, raises a lot of issues as far as the use of personal data is concerned. Section 38 of 4, which is on the screen there, talks about the data being retained to be used only for legitimate purpose, for the purpose for which it was retained. And so it shouldn't be something that is shared with everybody willy-nilly, and this would be a breach. The Child's Right Act also protects the personal data of children, while the Freedom of Information Act also has an element of personal data protection. What am I trying to say? Data protection is not new in Nigeria. It's always been there. But the issue has been that with the move into the digital economy, it becomes a bit of a challenge to use the old laws and try and protect personal data. And so apart from this, in terms of security, the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act in Section 21 deals with the reporting of cyber threats. So if there is a threat or there is a breach in anything you're managing and it contains people's information, it is expected that you're supposed to report any such cyber breach to the authorities. You're also not supposed to use the identity of your customer to carry out any transaction without his permission. That's in Section 22, Section 29, talks about breach of confidence, which has a similar provision with the identity theft provision of section 22. And then section 37 also deals with the duty of financial institution. You must know your customer. What does that mean also? You have to have the personal data of your customer before you have a transaction. And that puts an added responsibility on how to protect that personal data. And where you fail, you are also punishable under the law. But all these steps do not really provide the requisite data protection, regime that we need as a country, which is stepping into the digital era, or which has already stepped into the digital era. I can't say stepping because we are all doing digital transactions all over the place. So NIDA came up with the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation with the objectives of just data privacy protection, secure exchange of personal data, improving the business environment, and creating sustainable jobs. Of course, in his introduction, Peter mentioned the DPCOs, which is a framework NIDA came up with in order to meet the challenges of trying to carry out enforcement with minimal effort from the agency itself. So the scope of this regulation covers all residents of Nigeria and all Nigerians. Of course, there has been a little bit of fault in that particular scope because it excludes visitors that are residents in Nigeria but are not Nigerians. This is being addressed by the Data Protection Bill, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later. It also affects the public sector and the private sector in terms of data protection management. This is just a brief report of some of the things we've done over the years. In terms of the enforcement of personal data protection, we've issued 230 compliance and enforcement notices. Sorry, this report is not as at this year. This report was as at May last year. We are still collating the report for this year and will soon release it. We have data breach cases. I remember that was probably the first year of our activities in terms of data protection. We've dealt with Truecaller. Remember, I'm sure a lot of you know Truecaller. They had access to personal information and they were using it anyhow. So we had to call them to order. We had to issue a framework on implementation of the regulation. We have to launch our portal and we have to provide guidelines for the use of personal data by public institutions. Whether we like it or not, they were we realized in implementation that there are several issues that affect public institutions uniquely. And so we had to address those issues, and hence we set up a guideline on how they will apply the data protection in order to meet the requirements of government regulations as well as the data protection regulation in itself. Now, here is a snapshot of the new data protection bill. Because it is in a bill stage, nothing is definitive yet, but these are the general principles and the various sections and how it affects. First of all, it enunciates the basic principles and legal basis for processing personal data. It establishes a data protection commission. It highlights the rights of data subjects, processing of sensitive data, how you're supposed to process it, compensation for data breach in favor of data subjects, duties of data controllers and data processors, data location and security, administration and enforcement, transborder transfer, and then of course there's offenses and penalties, while the Data Protection Commission can make regulations in order to ensure that we keep up to date as far as data protection is concerned. So we are expecting that before the end of this year or early next year, this particular act will be passed into law, and so we can have a more stringent regime on data protection. And it's very, very important as it helps our economy. So my recommendation is that for everyone who is dealing with personal data, you must consider a robust security regime for personal data protection. This is because there are basic requirements that you have to meet as far as data protection is concerned. For example, in the data protection regulation, specifically Article 2.6 states that you must put in place adequate security measures, a minimum standard, and it's important to ensure that this is complied with by all institutions and persons who are managing personal data. Also, you should take into consideration international data protection regime. Sheyi mentioned that. Very, very important, because if you infringe on this international data protection regime, their fines are hefty. And remember, they don't charge fines in Naira, they charge in dollars. Of course, you know what the exchange rate goes for these days. I don't need to explain that to you. Talk less of euros and pounds. So it's very, very important that that must be considered. And then you must consider the best implementation framework, as well as provide room for flexibility. So in conclusion, I did not deep dive because of the timing into all the necessary things that the law provides for, and list them and itemize them. But these laws are available online. Even the draft bill itself is available online. If you do a simple search, you find it. And the regulation is available on NIDA's website. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope you gain a few insights from what I have discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you for very robust presentation that you have delivered. Thank you very much. Haven't laid, or you'll agree with me that the foundation have been laid by Emmanuel and Sheyi, identifying the value of your personal information or your personal data, and the obligations and responsibilities of the those to whom you give your data on how to protect it, what they should do to make sure your data are safe in their custody. I want to thank you all very much for what you've done. All of this drives towards compliance. You need to comply to regulations and the framework that have been laid down. However, we believe that regulation is not, or compliance is not a tick in the box. But after regulation, what happens next? You know, how should you, what do you need to do to even adhere to these standards? And after you have adhered to these standards, what else? And what kind of culture should you put in place to ensure all of this is efficient? Now, there's a question here that I think that, Emmanuel, if you would like to look at it quickly before we go to the next.
Okay, I can see the question. The question goes, are online market platforms required to be licensed before operating in Nigeria? And if they are, please help submit the requirements and official regulatory fee. That sounds like a consultancy question. But the point is, we do not need you to register. What we need is simple. Do you manage personal data? Are they Nigerians or are they resident in Nigeria? If the answer to these two is yes, then our regulation automatically kicks in and holds you responsible. So for now, online marketplaces do not register with us in Nigeria, and I don't think they register with any other body. But that doesn't mean that in the future, as we continue to cover the regulatory space, there will not be a regulation for registration of online marketplaces. So right now, there is none. We still, and we should understand that our economy is still developing. So as NIDA, we need to manage innovation in such a way that we do not stifle innovation, promote innovation up to a level where we can actually walk in and provide the adequate regulation to ensure that we actually do this. That's why sometimes when I see people compare us to like the United States or compare us to like the UK, these people have done this for a long time. We are literally at the brink of just starting to do this form of regulation. We have allowed the market to explore itself and grow, but there are steps that have been taken. For example, the Federal Consumer Protection and Anti-Competition Agency also deals with marketplaces and unfair advantage. So the simple answer to your question is no, there is no registration framework at the moment, but it doesn't preclude it in the future. The only thing that brings you under a regulation is if you manage personal data and the person lives in Nigeria or is a Nigerian, you should comply with our regulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. We will move straight into the next presentation by Goodness Okpani. So let's welcome Goodness Okpani.
See Outlook. Let me open Outlook. Okay, sorry. Let me see. This is already afternoon, and it's a surprise that we have kept you for this long. But I'm going to keep this as simple as possible and very brief, so that you can go back to your different activities. Once again, thank you very much for speakers, Mr. Sheyi and Mr. Emmanuel, for having brought us this far and giving us those insights into data protection, data privacy, and when we engage with different customers from time to time, different clients, different organizations across different industry sectors. And one of the questions that I love to ask, I mean, especially when we are under all of these forums, will be, what would you consider your most valuable asset? I mean, asset is anything that is of value, of course. But among all of the things of value, what would you consider as your most valuable assets? And again, the response will be most times things that are tangible, things that they can see, these things that they can touch. Their edifice, for example, the laptops, for example, their servers, for example. Well, you see, the problem has always been that we have never focused on the fact that data or information has and will always be the most valuable assets you as a person or as an organization can ever have. Take, for example, your internet banking server, which you regard as your most valuable asset for those coming from financial organizations or those who are hosting online trading portals. You view your server as your most valuable asset. However, if you take out the information from there, realize that that server in itself becomes valueless. So you see, at the end of the day, data or information becomes what you regard as your most valuable asset. We have talked about a lot. I mean, lots has been said regarding cybersecurity, regarding data protection, regarding data privacy, and we have that all over, cut across. I remember Mr. Emmanuel mentioned that the truth is, when we speak about data protection, data privacy right here in Nigeria, it's really not a new thing. It's really not a new thing. It has been many years. And I'm going to take you just a little bit, a brief history regarding data protection. It all began in 1890. I mean, you can imagine as far back as then, it's two different lawyers who came up with something they call the right to privacy, where they identified that, where they defined that right to privacy as a right to be left alone. So you see, that terminology as data privacy has already been in the works. Then we have in 1992, where we had the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, adopting the right to privacy. In 2002, where the EU adopted this Directive of Privacy and Electronic Communications. We have in 2016, where the GDPR itself was approved by the EU Parliament. And then up until this moment, presently, just some few years ago, when the GDPR became something that was passed into effect within the EU. Then within the Nigerian context, we now have the NDPR. So again, the point here is that over time, many, many years ago, data regulations, data privacy regulations, bills have always been in effect. However, in spite of all of this, we still have had, and we still will have cases of data breaches. Mr. Sheikh talked about a few of them. Data leaks. We talk about the data breach that happened with Yahoo, where about 3 billion accounts were leaked, or about LinkedIn, where some 7 billion accounts were leaked, or about Uber, where about 57 million accounts were also leaked. Or do we come down even to the Nigerian context, where we had data breaches that have occurred? For example, the one that happened in Arik, where massive customers' data were leaked, or with the case of the Nigerian Yellow Card website that leaked thousands of data. So again, we have all of these regulations. We have all of these data protection acts, and yet we still have data breaches that happen every single time. Now you see the similarity in all of these different major organizations that you have had, or that we see that have the same cases of data breaches is, one, they all had loss of sensitive data. Two, they had cybersecurity practices in place. So you see, they were already implementing some sort of cybersecurity or data protection in place. They were under data regulation laws. Yes, of course, this has always been there. They had huge cybersecurity technology solutions. I mean, we have seen the different examples of all of these big companies, yet the same issue has always persisted, which is data breaches, which is data hacks, leak of personal data. What is the root cause of all of this? That brings us to the subject we're talking about, which is the essence of this whole conversation. That most times the approach for data protection for organizations has just been compliance, a check in the box approach. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4 set of requirements as coming from a data regulation body, all the organization needs to do is just to read the first requirements and check. Number 2, we check. Number 3, we check. And that is all. And once they are done with that and they put each of those different things in place, they move on. And they just show evidence that they are complying to that particular regulation. And that has always been the approach. We have seen this in various cases right here in Nigeria. We have seen this in various cases all across the world. Compliance, check in the box approach. Now, you see, there are challenges that come with this, the root cause of this check in the box approach. And one of them is that there are just too many regulatory frameworks. There are just too many. Set up shop anywhere. Just start doing a kind of business. Would you want to start doing online trading? Or you want to start a financial institution? Or you're in the manufacturing industry? Or you're in the health sector? Across different industries, the moment when you set up your shop to start your business, the next thing that will start slamming you are different regulatory bodies coming at your door. A lot of them, a lot of regulations to be able to focus on. Take, for example, the CBN blueprints that came on board. Surely this affects the deposit money banks and the PSPs. The CBN blueprint, at least a minimum of between 10 to 11 different frameworks and regulations that have to put in place. PCI DSS, ISO 27001, 27032, 22301. Then we have NDPR, and we're going to have more like that. So we have lots and lots of regulatory frameworks that are in place, which is good, but then there are many. And again, because of the huge number of regulatory frameworks that organizations need to comply to, they begin to follow that approach of simply following that check in the box approach so that they just pass this one and then they move on. Or the second root cause will be the fact that we now have more data than we can even handle. The two speakers before me have just talked about a little more about this, where we have more and more data that are being generated per day. Just take a look at these statistics. This is from a site that calculates the amount of data that is generated every day. They call themselves Data Never Sleeps. Just take a look at the number of data that is generated by different sources. Look at this is between 2019 and 2020. And as you can see from the 2020, there are some new entrants into 2020. We can see Zoom, we can see Teams, which are not even there in 2019. I mean, in the amount of data. And we see we know what necessitated the fact that Zoom begin to generate this amount of data, the COVID-19. The fact that organizations have to start using virtual meeting workplaces rather than coming in physical. And again, we say with the Internet of Things, with the way businesses operate, no more coming together using physical workspaces, no more coming to a physical server and logging in, no more having to deploy physical machines to be able to work. Everything is now virtual. And with this Internet of Things, more and more data will begin to arise. And you see, at a point, we are going to reach that point where there will be more data to handle than the humans that are even going to handle such data. And again, that presents another problem for organizations who follow that compliance or check in the box approach. So what is the solution? Well, the solution basically still comes back to what we have identified as the three components of an organization, what organizations have to put more effort in doing. The three components of an organization typically are what we define as the people, the process, and the technology. Again, how can we use these three different components to be able to drive the solution to this check in the box approach, right? and provide a more robust, better approach to achieving data protection? Well, we'll start with the people. And again, when talking about the people, I want to start it from the top management. They want to be able to appoint a person who will drive or lead the data protection practices within the organization. And speaking about this, I mean, different questions have come up with regard to this, especially when it relates to data protection. Because you see, for example, the NDPR came into effect, we began to see it being implemented by starting from financial organizations, because they are the ones that hold this measure of the financial sensitive data. Most of them already had CISOs who are in place. And the question will be, can a CISO be a DPO? Because you see, a DPO is a data protection officer. A data protection officer is mandated by the regulation bodies, whether it's GDPR or NDPR, to drive or lead data protection practices within an organization. And the question would be, you find that most of these organizations who have already started having a form of CISO, a person who is driving cybersecurity in place, automatically gave that same role of data protection to the CISO. Can a CISO be a DPO? Again, there are so many angles to this conversation, but you see, the point remains is that when you start to consider the objective of these two roles, you find that at some point they become similar. The CISO is simply driving cybersecurity or information security protection for his organization, the objectives being confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. The data protection officer is driving same data protection, but for the data subjects. So you see, on one hand of this conversation are people who are saying that your CISO cannot be the DPO because according to Article 8 of the GDPR, which same article also exists in the NDPR regulation, the person who exists as a data protection officer should be independent of the organization. I mean, he should be able to act independently. Not necessarily he could be independent. So he should be able to act independently of the organization. So the question now happens to be, when there is a point where the top management have to agree on a particular business venture that requires using customer data to be able to achieve a particular need without their consent, what happens? Again, can the CISO be able to operate independently when he's even on the payroll of his organization? Again, if we're bringing a DPO in place, what is the cost to the organization of having two different roles happening at the same time and paying two different people who are still achieving the same objective? So again, at the end of the day, there has to be this convergence between what the data protection officer role is and what is the CISO role. Because if you look at it objectively, at the end of the day, apart from just protecting the cybersecurity, the security of your own organizational data, you're also protecting your customers, because your customers are key to your business. They are your stakeholders. So the data subject, who you call your customers, when we protect their data, we are at the long run also protecting the interest of the organization, because they are a part of you. So at the end of the day, those objectives are still similar. It is left to each organization to determine whether they're going to appoint a different person to be a data protection officer or to give that role to a CISO. But the point is that those roles and responsibilities have to be clearly defined, and those people have to be clearly put in place. And this is one. Two is to drive educational awareness among those people. So you want to be able to ensure that the people, and I mean your data subjects, your customers, are even aware regarding the need for data privacy, regarding the need to be able to say, okay, this is the kind of data I need. And again, this comes back to the fact that we need to be able to carry out educational awareness from time to time, whether it's within the organization as employees, or from time to time, send out articles, send out webinars, create this kind of awareness for people, for them to be able to understand the value of their data and why they should care. Remember, that's the theme of this whole organization. Why should you care about your data, about the way your data is handled? Educational awareness like this brings this to the fore. Now, away from the people, we go to the process. And now this is something that we love to talk about, because again, when we come to this process, this is where organizations need to change an approach from not just a compliance or a check in the box affair, but to a more business as usual approach. We have called this a business as usual approach. The focus here is to take each of those requirements defined by the different regulations and enshrine them as part of the practices of the organization. And that is key here. So take, for example, a typical process. One of the requirements of the data protection, whether it's coming from the GDPR or the NDPR, is that when developing, especially front-end applications that customers interact with, they should always make sure that customers consent to use, or that the data that that application is using for maybe getting customer data, the customers are consenting to that. So there should be a way or a form or something on their application where the person can actually consent to or remove his consent right there on that application. So the business as usual approach will be not at the point when you want to comply to that particular thing, but even at the start of the development. So for every single application, for example, that your application developers want to develop, at the design stage of the application, the question will be, will your data protection officer or those who are in charge of leading data protection within your organization, are they involved? So that is where it will start from. And it's just a single process. So that has to be built even at the design stage before it even goes into production. Again, this is the business as usual approach. You want to ensure that for every single activity within the organization, especially those activities that interact with customers that handle data, that handle customers' data, you want to be able to ensure that at every point of time, they're taking into cognizance how that data is handled with respect to the customer's privacy. So employing this new approach is key. You see, regulations are just basic. Regulations just give you a hint. I mean, our good friends in the NITDA have sat down and defined a robust regulation that people need to follow. But again, that is just supposed to be the basis. That's where organizations need to start from, not the goal. And that's the point we're making here. Those regulations should not be the goal. That should be the starting point. So from there, they now move into a more comprehensive approach. Again, they should be able to have what is called an integrated management approach for all of the different regulations, for all of the different frameworks that come into play. So create for yourself a customized management system, that speaks to the different regulations, whether it's NDPR, whether it's coming from cybersecurity, whether it's coming from ISO, whatever it's coming from. Create your own customized managed system, a system that has its own set of policies and procedures that need to be followed, so that you don't have to wait until when the hammer falls on your head or when it's time for audit for you to begin to comply to one or two things. You want to start it. You want to create your own customized management approach so that it meets all of these various regulations and you don't have too many regulations that are overwhelming you. And that's another key when it comes to the process for organizations. And the third solution, again, comes back to your technology. Because you are achieving maturity within your process, you want to be able to ensure that you put in technology solutions in place. Data has three states, basically. There is data in use, there is data at rest, there is data in motion. These are the three different states as outlined, defined. So when implementing technology solutions, you want to be able to map technology solutions to each of these these states of data. So think about your encryption, especially with regard to customer information, as it is being passed from one state to another. So you want to be able to ensure that data is encrypted as it moves from one state to another, so that a person does not happen to be on that data and begin to collect information. You want to ensure that data is monitored. So as it's going from one state to another, as it is moving, you want to be able to monitor it. You want to be able to provide insight into that data. Then you want to be able to implement a data loss prevention. Data loss prevention solutions help you to be able to ensure where you have data leaks, especially with regard to a scenario where, for example, you send an information to a third party, and from that third party person, he sends that information to outside without you knowing. You want to be able to curb those kind of situations. By implementing a data loss prevention solution in place, you're able to curb those kind of situations. You're able to prevent even your own employee from accidentally sending a customer data from the environment outside to someone else, because it flags that information as classified or as sensitive and blocks that particular sending from happening. So implementing data encryption solutions, data monitoring solutions, data loss prevention solutions within this technology space will help you to be able to achieve your data protection effectively within the organization. So essentially, at the end of this, the question is, why should you care? You should care because data is an asset. Data is your most valuable asset. You should care because the protection of that data directly or indirectly affects your revenue as an organization. You should care because your customers are stakeholders within your business. So implementing this three-pronged approach from the people, the process, and the technology side within your data protection efforts, approaching these data protection activities, not from a compliance or check-in-the-box approach to a more robust business-as-usual approach, will help you as organizations, as people, to be able to achieve data protection effectively. So thank you very much, everyone. And I will hand it over to Mr. Peter to conclude this conversation.
Thank you very much, our speakers. You've done a great service to the subject that is being that was raised up today. I want to thank the speakers, Emmanuel, Sheyi, and Goodness. You have done justice to the work, and we're grateful. By popular demand, I would request that you authorize us to share your slides with the audience. We will also be sending you links to the recorded files so that if you want to listen to this again, you are allowed to freely download it and then listen to the presentation one more time. Some questions came up and they were addressed. Some of them you will need to maybe reach out to us later on so that we can provide you with additional one-on-one response to your questions. The Expert Talk series is a program that we have created in our company, Ethnos. We are going to be having this on a regular basis where we'll bring experts from different backgrounds and from different experiences to come and enlighten the Nigerian and the global audience on different subjects that we will identify from time to time. And we will be reaching out to some of you from time to time to also participate in this Expert Talk series. So it's going to deal with issues within technology, digital transformation, and security over time. Lastly, Ethnos is also a registered or a licensed DPCO, which means if you need to implement efficiently the NDPR framework, you can speak to us and we'll have a consultant who will help you to break down the processes and also support you on the journey. So at this point in time, we have spent much more time than we had envisaged, but I'd like to thank all of you for your patience and understanding. Pretty much everybody stayed for as long as the program has lasted. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. At this point in time, we don't have any other questions that on the chat box, so we will have to close. I want to thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless, and bye.